Good afternoon. My name is Yvonne Ortiz. I am the Training Institute Manager for the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our webinar titled Keeping Your Cup Full, Self-Care is Essential to Trauma-Informed Advocacy, Part 2. Our webinar today is part of the spring webinar offerings of the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence Training Institute. The recording of Part 1 of this webinar can be found in our online library, Bonnet, and alongside many other resources on violence against women and other forms of gender-based violence. The NRCDV works to improve community response to domestic violence and ultimately prevent its occurrence. Our comprehensive technical assistance, training, and resource development are a few examples of the many ways in which NRCDV serves those dedicated to ending domestic violence in relationships and community. The NRCDV understands that in order to truly end domestic violence, we must address all of the systems that generate and sustain it, and that working in solidarity across issues of justice is the only way to bring about meaningful social change. This is why in 2016, we adopted the NRCDV stand statement, which affirms that we support and center the voices of individuals and groups who have been targeted, degraded, threatened, or marginalized because they are Native Americans, people of color, immigrants, women, Muslims, LGBTQ, or people with disabilities, and that we stand against white supremacy, racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and all other forms of structural oppression. The NRCDV is also committed to support those who embrace self-care and community connection as necessary and powerful for social change. As you all know, advocacy during COVID-19 has been proven to be very difficult. At the NRCDV, we're making an effort to respond to the needs of advocates just like you. We are working diligently to develop resources that are helpful, that make you feel supported and valued, especially for those of you that continue to put yourself at risk to support survivors safely. Adequate self-care, as you know, it's vital to sustaining our long-lasting careers as victims advocates. Today, Vanessa Timmons will discuss strategies for managing work-related stress and will address the importance of taking time to address emotional and physical damage caused by workplace stress. I would like to introduce Vanessa, and we are at the NRCDV. We are very, very excited. As I mentioned before, this is part 2 of our Self-Care is Essential to Trauma-Informed Advocacy webinar. And Vanessa is very dear to us. She has been a writer, activist, and women's health advocate for over 25 years. She attended Maryhill University, multidisciplinary studies program in Portland, Oregon, and has continued her formal education through certificates and training, including the Interpersonal Neurobiology of Trauma certification program at Portland State University. Vanessa is the Executive Director of the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. She is an accomplished writer, an activist, a storyteller, and she's dedicated to exploring the healing power of words. She's the author of guided journal, The Way of the Heroine. Vanessa, welcome to our webinar today. We're really, really excited to have you.
Thank you, Yvonne. I'm so excited to be here, and it was really wonderful to hear you read through the National Resource Center's values. That was just really nourishing to me, so thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Yvonne.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to say that it's something that we put together just because we wanted the field to know that we're committed to doing this work. We don't want only to look good in paper, on paper. We want to do the work, and then we know that it's hard work, but it has to be done in order for us to excel as an organization.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Just really lovely to listen to. So I appreciated that. Hello, everybody. I am really happy to be here in the midst of all that we are experiencing as advocates. I don't think that there is a more critical gathering than the one that we're having today to discuss how we care for ourselves and how we prepare ourselves for the task ahead. I think we are essential folk, essential workers, essential mothers and daughters and grandparents. And so it's so important to me that we have gathered today to have this conversation. I'm going to invite you to have a pen and paper handy. This is an interactive conversation, but it's also a conversation you're having with yourself. So I just want to invite you to take a minute, grab a pen and paper, grab a glass of water, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and really allow yourself to give this hour to yourself. So that's my invitation to you. And we'll get started. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We are going to talk about workplace stress and really talk about the way our work influences our health and influences our stress responses. And so that's going to be the focus of today's workshop. We are going to talk about the barriers and the myths that inhibit our self-care practices. We're going to just really kind of look at some of those. We're going to explore our individual and collective self-care practices and just learn from one another. I will share what I've learned. I hope that you will share what you've learned. We are a community, and together we're going to get better and better at how we care for ourselves. I've got some resources that we'll talk about, and I also have a poem written by an advocate that I'll share with you at the end. And so those are just some of the things that we'll address. I would like to hear from folks if you're carrying some questions right now that are really specific, that you're carrying, things that you really hope that I can cover in this time together. I'd love to hear those and see those. So go ahead if you have a question that you are carrying in your body, in your mind, in your work, that you're hoping to hear, hoping to have addressed. I really want to hear that because I'd like to try to address them. So I'm just going to give folks time to pull those up, and I'll be watching for them. And as folks are kind of gathering their questions, I'll be looking for those, but I'm don't take too much time. But one of the questions that I carry a lot in my body, one of the questions that I carry a lot is why self-care? Why is it important? Why do we do it? What are some of the, I know from my practice working with hundreds and hundreds of survivors of trauma that if we don't know our why, then it's hard for us to get motivated and engaged in something. So one of my favorite deep thinkers around self-care is Dinara Marte, and you would Google her, grab her website. I mean, she's just phenomenal and does a tremendous body of work. But one of my favorite things that she talks about or says is this quote here, where we are dying. We are social justice. We are social activists on the front line, transforming the world with a backpack full of fear, guilt, shame, loneliness, resentment, and anger that is killing us. And so, that is Dinara's why, right? That we're doing this work. We care so deeply for the folks that we work for and with. We are committed to these practices of changing the world, right? We were born to do this. We're in this world to change the world, to have an impact, to make a difference. And in that process, we are impacted by all that we see and all that we confront and all that we know. And so part of our why is that we have to be able to be healthy containers for all the work that we do. That's my why, to be a healthy whole container for the work that I'm doing, to be able to show up in a good way to face some of those really scary things. So I'd really like to hear your why. What are some of the whys that why would you show up this afternoon for this webinar for self-care? What's your why? Rose, awesome. I'm just listening for answers here. Needing to take care of me so I can take care of others, right? Awesome. Oh, I love the Audre Lorde quote. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Oh, thank you, Tony. One of my favorites. Grace, right? We're here for some grace. To really be present with my loved ones. New job with twins, 18-month old. Congratulations, Meredith. Without self-care, there's no balance. Obvious, yes, awesome. To learn more skills to support myself and my colleagues. Great, we're going to talk about that. Giving myself permission. Oh, thank you, Jara. Yeah, awesome. Those are wonderful whys. I mean, just reading them inspires me. Like, those are the things that as advocates, as social workers, and medical professionals, those are the things that we carry, right? Can we take care of ourselves? And how do we, as with Audrey's quote, how do we resist the idea that we are being self-indulgent when we need to care for ourselves? These are just wonderful. I used to, I love Tony, I used to be a horrible warning, and now I'm a positive role model. Thank you, Tony. I am with you, my friend. Absolutely. That is wonderful. And Lisa says, my why is to be able to help just one person that I know I'm making a difference. Thank you, Lisa. Yes. Like, right? This is a beautiful community and the work that we're doing. Yeah. Incredible whys. So when we talk about workplace stress, what do we mean? Like, what do we mean by that? How is it different than other stress? And, how is our work causing stress? And these are just questions that people have about, what are we talking about when we talk about this? And so what we know is that through the CDC, stress is defined as the harmful physical and emotional responses that occur when the requirements of the job do not match the capabilities, resources, and needs of the worker. And so I think what's important about this kind of definition is that what we're talking about is the tension between our expectations and what we face and meet every day, right? And it also speaks to the environments and the containers that we have to enter into every day. Like, are we walking into safe workplaces? Are they physically, emotionally, spiritually spaces that we can be in a good way? How am I prepared for the demands of my work? And what resources are available to me when I'm struggling? Because all humans struggle. And am I being listened to? Are my needs being listened to? Do people hear me when I say I'm struggling? Do people respond in a good way when I say I don't have enough resource or that I need a different resource? And so when we talk about workplace stress, it is about our expectations, our needs, and the responses to those things. And when those things are not in balance with one another, stress rises, right? Stress just rises in us when that happens. So that's what we're talking about today, and that's what we're going to be addressing. Yeah, I agree, Stephanie, that, COVID has brought on a whole new level and need for a conversation around self-care. I think that's so true. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you, and I want to invite those of you who are able to type in the chat box to really, that piece of paper and that pen I asked you to grab. This is the time to really take a minute and jot something down. But I'm just going to ask you and give a little spaciousness around how does stress impact you right now, today? I just want you to take a second, just close your eyes for just a second and check in with your body and ask yourself, how is stress impacting me right now, today? Take a breath, listen, and just let whatever rises, rise. You don't have to answer. You don't have to share. You are welcome to. But just how is that? Yeah, Heather, I see that anxiety. Yeah. And Stephanie, I feel as if I don't have enough time in the day, which makes me feel racing to the next day, not sleeping, Tony. It's difficult to concentrate, Yvonne. Lack of productivity, Alexandria. Marcia, not sleeping and is anxious. Yeah, inability to act, Carla. Knots in the back of my neck, Janice. Tension in my left side. Feeling burnout, Joanna. Need more naps, Marissa. Yeah. Decision fatigue, very real, very real. Irritable, overwhelmed. I don't know how to separate my work from my home life as a shelter manager. Yeah, Karen, thank you. Physically headaches, stomach issues, lack of sleep, excessive dreams about work. Yeah, Sojourner, the dreams are really up right now, right? There's a whole body of work happening in my spiritual and healing community around dream work right now, because our dreams have gotten really meaningful and really, we're having a new quality for our dream world. Absolutely. Inability to focus, Kathy. Yeah, I mean, these are the things. And just that little practice that I shared with you of taking that 1 second to close your eyes, take a breath, and ask your body, how is stress impacting me this minute? Not in the next minute or not yesterday, but this minute is a really good practice. So just make a note that you've already done your first self-care practice. So congratulations. We just learned how to listen to our body, right? And so much wisdom, Rose, so much wisdom came from that, for our learning community that we're in today. Right? And here are some of the ways that we know, right, as healers, as educators, as advocates, that stress shows up. And they're very much many of the things that we talked about. I think that, people are fatigued, but unable to sleep. People are feeling such overwhelm. It's, one of the most common things that I'm hearing right now from people in connection to workplace stress is how hard it is to prioritize and figure out what needs to be completed and when. There's this cognitive load that people are thinking. Yeah, Jacqueline just mentioned it. I can't think clearly, right, Jacqueline? That is really up right now, and I'm hearing that from lots and lots of people. And that's and we're going to talk about why that is in a minute, because that's a really very common body response to overwhelm. And so what our bodies are telling us is that we're actually in a level of stress that is too much, right? There's all kinds of stress, but when we're feeling that, it's because our bodies are a little overwhelmed with the stress that it's having. And we've got great practices for coping with that. And Lisa's saying constantly working and not slowing down, right? Yeah. Like that's one of those stress responses. And people don't often mention that as a stress response, right? This working and not slowing down, but that's hypervigilance, right? That is a stress response because it's a way we try to outrun our bodies. And what we know as healers and what we learn in neurobiology is that you can never outrun the body. The body is always moving so much more quickly than our cognitive capacity to understand it. So while we feel like we're just keeping going, running on that hamster wheel, the reality is our bodies are still experiencing all the stress that they are. And Jacqueline talks about breaking out in hives, and I've heard that from several people as well. These are all really common stress responses. People are having hives and rashes and neck and back and shoulder pains. And, these are all ways our body's telling us, oh my goodness, pay attention. And the other thing that we know about the body is that the body will send us these messages first as little subtle things, which is why I had you practice that first practice of take a minute, take a breath, notice, because the body has these little subtle sensations that tell us that stress is up. But by the time our body is at this higher level, showing with rashes and things like that, the body's been telling us for a while that the stress level is high. And that's what we're talking today about practices, because the practices that we're going to discuss are ways to prepare yourself to deeply listen to your body and to hear the warning signs before we have our overwhelm. And right now we're all overwhelmed in all reality. And Joseph says guilt from, I lost Joseph, sorry, okay. Not sure what happened, but I hope it'll show up again. Okay. Oh, sorry, the chat got full. Okay, thank you. Admin. So let's talk about the myths and barriers. And this is really kind of, as I mentioned, we take that breath, we go in, we listen. What prevents us from being able to act on the information that we get, right? We're humans. We have a really vigorous nervous system and brain-body connection, and it's awesome. It works really well. So what happens? Where does that break down? What myths and barriers do we have to face and mitigate and prepare ourselves for so that we can still be able to meet these things, right? To make a different choice. So let's check in and look at some of that. So the most common myths, there's a million, and I would love to hear, pull some simple abundance there, abundance, that's awesome. So this is another moment that I want you to use your pen and paper, take a sip of water, and I just want you to jot down for yourself or post in the chat, what are some of the myths that you specifically deal with around that get in your way around self-care? What are some of the myths that you have noticed? The stories you tell yourself, the things that you commonly get in the way. You say, oh my gosh, I would love to go for a walk, or I'd love to hear some great music right now, or oh my goodness, I need to reach out to a nourishing friend, but something gets in your way. What is that voice saying to you? What's it say? Life is going too fast. It's selfish. I'll do it later. That's a great one. That's mine. Too busy. Self-care is not productive. Oh, Rowan, thank you. That's an awesome one. I'm just too tired. I can't do another thing. That's legit, right? That's legit. I have to do it perfectly, Taz. Absolutely, right? That there's some perfect way to do it. I don't deserve it. Absolutely, Deborah, right? That idea that we have to be perfect even before we can take care of ourselves. We have this culture of perfection, that before I could even be good enough to have good care, I have to look a certain way, talk a certain way, have a certain job, all of that, right? That we have to earn the right to be good to ourselves. That's a very common and overpowering myth in our culture. Self-care has to look a certain way. And I love Patricia's right here. Work before pleasure. That was the one that just got in my way all the time, because I come from working class farm worker folk from Hooks, Texas, in I think it's East Texas, in Texarkana, close to there. My people are farm workers. They are hard workers. They work from sun up to sundown, and there was this work ethic that just said, you work first, and whatever you had left was for you. Right? Very common myth. And I think that's a very common myth among us who are people of color and folks who come from working class communities. That our folks pass down that legacy of, you don't waste time on self, on self, right? TD Pearson saying yes, right? We got those messages as people of color and poor working class people, and it's hard for us to see self-care as something we are worthy of, and also something that is meaningful. Imposter syndrome, yes, absolutely. Ashe. So, common myths that prevent self-care. Self-care is all or nothing. I really want to address this, because this one is a way that we kind of bail out on ourselves, right? Like this is part of that I'm not good enough piece. If I can't do the self-care, and I think that some of the self-care conversations that happened early in the field are responsible for this. Self-care was taking these serious bubble baths, or going to trips to who knows where, and getting massages, and it's like, I can't do any of that. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the time. I wasn't always comfortable with people touching me. None of that stuff was self-care to me, right? So I just didn't even see myself in that. And so I had that all or nothing attitude. And that myth just got in my way until I realized that self-care gets to look like I need it to look. And it can be as small as I need it to be. And the only thing that it has to be is meaningful to me. That's it. That's the only thing it has to be, is meaningful to me. And that can look any way I need it to look. And it can also look like chocolate, which is a big one for me. It can look like just doing absolutely nothing for as long as I need to. It can look like a glass of water. It can look like a phone call to a friend. That all or nothing thing. It's a lie. It's a story. The other myth I want to address is that self-care requires resources that you don't have. And this is a big one for us as POCs and working class folks, or even poor folks, houseless folks. Those of us who are we're not the ones that have everything all the time, right? And the best, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the best resource you have for self-care is you and your community, the people who love and support you. That's your resource. Self-care is not something you can buy, actually. There's a ton of research on this, and I wish I had taken time to kind of been able to pull it, but it's COVID, so, but there's a lot of resources out there about people who have a lot and can spend a lot on these self-care things that you can purchase, don't actually have better care for themselves. That it's not something you can actually buy. It's an experience that you are having. And so I can't emphasize that enough, right? Yeah, Stephanie, exactly. Self-care is a practice for life. Awesome. Yeah. So much wisdom on this call. I'm just blown away by y'all. The other one is that self-care is optional. I really want to break this myth. I want to break this myth for every single advocate who is on this call. I want to break this myth. Self-care is not the thing you do when everything else is done. It is not optional. I want you to just take a breath, take your pen, and write on your paper, I deserve self-care. Taking care of myself is no longer an option. Just write it down. It is not, not taking care of yourself is no longer an option. Self-care is essential, it is meaningful, and it belongs to you. You have every right to it. And so just take a minute, write that down, let that soak into your cells, take your breath, close your eyes, feel those words, and know that I've got your back in this, right? It is yours. So the other myth we're going to address is practicing self-care means making a choice between yourself and others. As someone in our community already mentioned that using Audre Lorde's quote, I've seen so many messages in here just stating that I think we've got this. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on this, that we know that taking care of ourselves and is taking care of our communities, specifically our communities, LGBTQ communities, POC communities, communities living in poverty, immigrant, refugee communities. Our communities need us to take care of each other because we are the ones taking care of ourselves and one another, right? So we know that that's just a myth kind of created to keep us from doing it, and we're just going to let that go. Another myth around this that we know is that self-care is anything that soothes you, right? And I want to say that self-care is anything that builds your resiliency. It's anything that nourishes your full appreciation and acceptance of yourself, of your body, of your people, right? So self-care is not just anything that soothes you. Our self-care has to nourish us from the earth up. Oh, I love this. Self-care is an ethical responsibility we all have to ourselves, our clients, and each other. Thank you, Amanda. I love that. That is awesome. So, and then the last myth I want to address is we have to earn the right to practice self-care. And I think we've addressed these, but these are real myths, y'all. Like, this is not something, these stories can hold us captive and can keep us from doing the things that we most need to do. And so we don't want to ever minimize or ignore the power of the stories we tell ourselves or the stories that our culture or our community tells us. So we want to be aware of these myths so that they can no longer be barriers to us. So that the exercise I started with having you just check in, and then the other one, like, okay, what are the stories you're carrying? What are some of the myths about self-care? And we all talked about that. That's an ongoing practice. When you find that you're struggling to take care of yourself, take a minute and just ask yourself, okay, what stories are rolling right now, right? What stories are keeping me captive? What have I internalized as a marginalized person, as a person doing this work? What stories have I internalized that are now preventing me from surviving and thriving and taking good care? Because the minute you know it, you can then tell yourself a new and more accurate story. So this is another practice that we've got, that you've had a little practice with. Okay, so let's talk about barriers, because myths and barriers are different. Myths are sometimes these stories external stories. We can internalize them, but we also can recognize that that's just not really for me. I don't really think of it that way. Barriers are often things that feel really like us to us, and we all have different barriers. We all have different things that get in our way. But these are some pretty broad ones that I have found as I work with as a healer and as a community organizer in my own Black and African and African American community. But these are some of the barriers that are really challenging that we have addressed and are always addressing as a community and as individuals. And one is that the inability to embrace complexity. We are more than one thing. We learn this with intersectionality framework, right? That we are more than one thing, and that we are full, complex, vigorous living beings. And our stress responses and how we are coping is part of who we are, and how we have epigenetics, we have family histories, we have work that is difficult, and this inability to just realize the complexity of self-care can be a barrier to even address it because we expect it to be simple. And so one of the things that I practice is just this constant willingness to say, it's complex, and I don't have all the answers. I don't know all of it. And giving myself permission to move anyway, to try anyway, and to allow the complexity to be part of the process that I'm going through. But just recognizing that as a barrier. And the other one is when we're really exhausted, and I know that so many of us are right now because we're on the front lines of pandemic, and many of us are POCs and LGBTQ folks, and so our communities are overwhelmed by this. And so this is part of it, right? We're exhausted, and so that's real. And that's why I say that self-care can just be being quiet for a while, having unstructured time for a while, making no commitments for a while, but realizing that diminished capacity can be a barrier, and that's why I say let it be as small as it needs to be. Hyper-vigilance, I already talked about that. The sense that one can never do enough, we talked about that. This is, I see a typo on my slide right now, so I'm laughing. My assistant Rowan's on the call, and I bet they would have copped it had I sent it to them earlier. But this feeling of helplessness and hopelessness is real, right? And I think right now, with all of the uncertainty that we're facing, that feeling can just bring us to the ground, right? It can bring us to the ground in a lot of ways. And I say that instead of allowing that to be a barrier, just incorporate the need to go slow and to be gentle and to understand that we're feeling helpless or hopeless, but we are not alone. And that's where I think resiliency and community care come in. And then a lot of it, the superhuman, like we can do it all ourselves type of thing is part of it too. That's a barrier. Like I don't need it. I can do everything. And then also some of the coping strategies that we have habitually used can be destructive and can sometimes become a barrier to true self-care because of the time that they're occupying. And I don't say that like I don't believe in judgment. I think that we all do what we need to do to cope and to soothe and to show up in whatever way we can. But it's important to know when these barriers are in your way. And so this is just another moment to take a second to jot down on your paper, that you have your pen and paper, what are some of your personal barriers? What are some of the ones that you are facing right now during this time? And I invite you to put it in the chat box, but I definitely want you to write it down on your paper because I want you to have these answers for yourself 2 months from now, a week from now that you have. But what are they? For me, personally, I think I'm facing the biggest barrier is the sense that I can never do enough. You know, I have a huge community and family, and so it feels kind of hard to step back and take care of myself, but I have a lot of support in my community, my staff at the coalition. You know, they just arranged for me to have 4 days off, which was wonderful because of Mother's Day, and my mom passed away in November, and they knew that I needed spaciousness around that, and they were awesome. So it's those kinds of things. We all have them. Yeah, Madeline, a lack of creativity and motivation, never feeling completed or accomplished. Oh, can I relate to that? That very much aligns with that sense of never have been enough, and not realizing, not knowing whether what we can do is enough. And we are all carers, right? We're activists. We're social justice warriors. So we aren't the first people to feel like we've done enough, right? So that can be a real barrier. Karen, thank you. Feeling guilty for taking time off. Yeah. And I just feel like we have to talk about this stuff as a community. And let me give you permission. The more you take care of yourself, the more available you will be for your community. We need every single one of you. Every single one of you are necessary right now. We are the ones most needed right now. And the best thing we can do is slow our roll, go inside and figure out, what can I offer? What do I have? And how do I nourish myself? Thank you, Tiffany. Depression, having space. Oh, Tiffany, I can so feel that. My mother passed away in December. I'm the oldest and I'm emotionally drained. I feel that. Like my mom passed away in December, so we are sisters in this one. It's not a fun sisterhood, but I got you. I hear you. So let's go. We're going to switch to time. Yvonne, can you let me know my end time? Anyone who knows me knows I tend to be in my process and I won't pay attention to the end time. So if someone could just put in my box what time I have to end, that would be really cool for me.
You can keep on going, Vanessa. It's 3:44, and we have time together until 3:30. And people are asking questions, so let's just keep on going.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
So we have invoked Audrey today, and here she is. She is what I call a self-care role model. She is my self-care role model, and I love her. And so I want you to take a minute and just write down who might be your self-care warrior. And I'll tell you a little bit about what your self-care role model and warrior really does for you, because they're an important person in your life. You need someone outside of you to guide you through this self-care journey, because it is a journey and it's a lifelong one. This is not something that you end today. So these are the two. I think we've already had one, but I'm going to say because I love to. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. As a young Black woman, when I first read that, it's in her book, A Burst of Light, and her essays. I just highly recommend this book. When I first read that, as a Black woman, I'm a survivor of trauma. I'm a survivor of the enslavement of my people, and I walk in Black skin in America. So when I read her words, it was like nourishment, right? That this is a way I can battle everything that is coming at me, and I can do it by taking care of myself. And if there's other survivors of trauma on the call, you know how hard that journey is, right? That it's just like, that's a whole nother conversation. And so that she's my self-care warrior for that. The other quote that I love for her from Audrey is, you have to learn to love yourself before you can love me or expect my loving. And this is from her book, Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred and Anger, Sister Outsider. And this was so important to me because it speaks to that question around am I being selfish, right? And it also speaks to something I want to challenge folks, my allies on the call, to think about. If you're not able to love your body and who you are and how you show up, how are you going to love my body and who I am and how I show up? There's a way that when we are whole and healed and loving people to ourselves, we are whole, healed, loving people to others. And so this speaks to allyship in a new way. If I'm going to ally with my LGBTQ sisters and brothers, then I have to be able to love my Black marginalized body fully and wholly too, right? Or if I'm going to ally with my siblings with developmental cognitive disabilities or mental health issues, then I still have to be an ally to my Black marginalized body. And so this is the way that we think about allyship a little differently and invite this whole new way of thinking about it. And so what I want you to do is think about, share, even in the chat, who are some of your self-care mentors, your self-care role models, the folks who we go back to and learn more and more every day about how to take care of ourselves. Mine is Audrey. I know she's that for so many. But there's also, somebody told me about someone recently, Brene Brown. I don't know a lot about that person. Oh, yay. Julia just mentioned her. Awesome. But Brene Brown is an amazing self-care role model for so many people. It's amazing. I'm hearing about her more and more. I can't wait to grab some of her books and start reading her work. But I just think, and the reason I say a self-care warrior is important is because we need someone to guide us. This is not something we should have to do. This is not like this pull yourself by your bootstraps kind of thing, right? This is a let's be in this together process, but I am individually having my own experience of it. And so it's important to, if you don't have a self-care role model, and that's fine, find one. Just make a commitment today that you're going to do that you're going to find that role model and have that person in your life. And it can be a person that you communicate with. I'm kind of introverted, so I like Audrey because I love to read. But finding the one that works for you, but make it an authentic relationship, right? Oh, Maya Angelou, Joseph, awesome. Oh, Tagat Han's another one of mine. Yes, absolutely. So we're going to move through the how, the toolkit. And this slide is going to talk, I'm going to try to, this is kind of, we talk a lot about the brain and the body and the intersection of the brain and the body. And this is a series, and I just want to invite, I'm not going to go into deep detail about this today because it takes a bit of time, but I am going to really invite you to write down the Dr. Stephen Porges, and I will, let me see if I wrote his name down somewhere here. And I don't think I wrote it down, but this is Dr. Stephen Porges' work, and he writes about polyvagal theory, and his theory is he talks a lot about the window of tolerance, and that body of work, Dr. Porges' work, is really important work for understanding how to heal from trauma. I think for us who are trauma survivors, this is an important piece of work because it's a missing piece of the puzzle. It's why when we are trying to take good care of ourselves and things get quiet or we go deeply within, we can get more anxious than someone who hasn't experienced trauma. We can have anxiety with our inner world in a way that is unique to survivors of trauma. And if there's others on the call that they get me, they know what I'm talking about. Because we all have that experience of like, we get, everyone talks about meditation and it's like, oh, thank you, Kathy. And then we, as, survivors, we sit and try to meditate and we're like, what the heck were they talking about? There's nothing fun about this. And so, oh, great. Thank you, Megan, window of tolerance. And so I am a certified in interpersonal neurobiology. I'm part of a 5-year study group. And so I have a lot of information about this and wanted to just have a little snapshot of it. And what I want to say is that our window of tolerance, if you look at the slide, is that window where we have the I can do it, right? Our window of tolerance is the place where we feel, our bodies feel contentment, we feel settled, we feel comfortable in our own skin, we feel able to deal with whatever kind of stress kind of comes in. We're not easily overwhelmed when we have our window of tolerance. And so that window of tolerance is different for each person, and trauma impacts it. It makes it less available to us. And so when let's say you have a really big window of tolerance, let's use bowls as an example. Let's say you've got a window of tolerance that is a huge bowl, like a swimming pool, a kid's swimming pool, and stress comes in, you're able to deal with it. You're able to function and respond because you've got a nice big bowl. And let's say that for reasons of trauma, you actually end up with a thimble, and your window of tolerance is just the size of a thimble. Then if stress comes in, you're quickly overwhelmed. And so that's what Dr. Porges' work is about, is that we all have different windows of tolerance. And based on whatever is coming at us, we're going to have different ways of responding. And on this slide, we're seeing that when stress comes in and we have a small window of tolerance, we pop into flight, fight, or freeze very easily. And if we have a large window of tolerance, then we stay in that place of I can and I am. So that's what that is showing us. The things that affect our window of tolerance, we are trauma, abuse, there's epigenetics, there's history, right? As people of color, the things that happen to our ancestors affect our window of tolerance. But the amazing, wonderful news about this is that the practices I'm about to share actually help us expand our window of tolerance. And every single human, irregardless of your age, your ability, whatever, you have the capacity to expand your window of tolerance and build a container of support and resiliency for yourself. That's the most amazing good news. And the research is really clear on this. And so as you explore this theory, there's several books out, there's several talks on YouTube, there's research papers. One of the books that I really love is called The Heart of Trauma, Healing the Embodied Brain in the Context of Relationships, and that's by Bonnie Bondanach. And then Dr. Porges has several books as well. So I just invite you to explore that. I just didn't want to have this conversation without sharing that good news, because I think for us, specifically survivors of trauma, it's a really important message to know that we can fully heal through this practice. So any questions about that? I know that's kind of dense compared to what we were talking about, but yay, people are getting it. Awesome. That's easier to teach in person than it is on a webinar. Yes, Yvonne, definitely. So let's talk about our toolkit, and we're just going to go through these really quickly and address some of the things that really will help us build that window of tolerance. Everything I'm sharing in this section are things that are research-based. We know they work. They're very effective and helpful tools. And there's a lot that I probably don't have in here that are also just as effective and helpful. One of the things we know as is that our ancestors already knew a lot of this stuff, right? They already knew a lot of it. Book recommendations related to this theory. I definitely have some, but I don't have them in this home office with me. But if Dr. Porges has written 2 books, and I would recommend both of his books. Yeah. And if anyone's interested in like other, like a book list or something like that, Yvonne, I can get you a whole book list for neurobiology. I have one that I just have to send it to you. So let me know if you need that.
Okay,
so let's
Thank you.
Yeah, I will definitely send that. And it has like 9 books on it, but they're all awesome. So core strategies for healing trauma. The number one is, I have this list as breath and meditation. We're going to talk about that because they're a little bit different. Movement, pleasant activities, diet, hydration, and gut health. Concern versus control, which is a new thing that I've been kind of playing with myself and found really lovely. Connection and community, and organizational strategies. And I'm speeding up a little bit because I know I'm getting close to needing to make sure there's time for questions. Kathy, I see that. I haven't heard of Deb Dana, another polyvagal. Oh, weird. Awesome. I will check that out. So breath, meditation, and body. We have already practiced. And what I want to say is that there's very little more that is more effective than that practice of closing your eyes, noticing your breath, not taking special breaths. Like you don't have to take a deep breath or a shallow breath, but just following your breath and being with your body. It's the most important thing that you can do for expanding that window of tolerance. And I think that the research is that we need to do that between 7 and 15 minutes to get like the most benefit. But I am a Vipassana meditator, so I meditate sometimes for like 30 or 45 minutes, and have found it hugely helpful just from personal experience. Our breath increases our lung capacity, and our lung capacity increases our circulation, and everything in our body starts to work better, right? And so belly breathing and meditation, hugely helpful. So I want you to just take a minute, again, grab your pen and paper there that you have there, and just think about what kind of meditation or deep listening to your body might you try. And we won't take time up to do this in the chat, but just jot down, are you interested in loving kindness meditation? Or do you want to know more about belly breathing? There's a YouTube video online on belly breathing that you can take a look at. Are you interested in a walking meditation? And someone mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh, who does some walking meditation. Or do you just want to sit quiet with your body and be in prayer, right? Do you want to explore guided meditation? Do you want to sit quietly with yourself for 5 minutes every day and just listen to your body and write in your journal, right? So just thinking about some of those things that you can do. And the most important thing is that the breath be present in whatever it is. That breath, your breath is your companion to this deep healing that we're talking about. And it's not a special kind of breath. It's noticing and staying with your breath. And thoughts and all kinds of things will rise. don't worry about those. Just stay with your breath. You don't have to ignore, you don't have to attach to them, or you don't have to create a big story about what they mean, or just notice them and right back to your breath. So pleasant activities. This is a really important tool in your toolbox as well. Having things to look forward to in your day-to-day. And they don't have to be big things. They can be anything that you can really get excited about. Is there a favorite series you want to watch with a friend? Or is there a recipe that you've been just really hankering to try and learn? Is there a book of poetry that just makes you smile when you read it? Is there a favorite blogger that you love to read, and you might just schedule an hour at the end of your workday to read that blog? Just some of those simple, pleasant things that allow you to know that you matter and that you carve out time just for you to do what you love. And I will say that this is so addictive. It's so amazing to schedule these. It is important to schedule them. Write it in your calendar. The dates and commitments you make to yourself are really important. And if you do have to change the plan, have that conversation with yourself or your self-care buddy and say, I'm not going to be able to do the pleasant activity I had planned for. What do you think? What else should I try to do? Don't do this in isolation. Oh, African drumming videos. Awesome, Jacqueline. So what I'm going to invite you to do right now is I just want you to write down one pleasant activity. Don't overthink it. One pleasant activity that you're going to do between now and June 1st. Just one little thing. One thing. And if you want to share some of your things, this would be great. I'd love to see some of the things that people are going to do. It doesn't have to be more than one, just one pleasant activity that you're going to do between now and June 1st. Starting to run again. Oh, bake a pecan pie. Yum. I wish I knew how to come to your house. Walking the dogs near the reservoir. Prepping for cross-country trip. Whoa, fun vacation. Take up meditation. Oh, a puzzle. Camping. Starting to work out. Painting. Oh, wonderful. Virtual yoga event. Awesome. Spend some time writing. That sounds great. Hikes with my dog. Awesome. So these are just things that as I read them, I can just feel the joy rising of things that we could do that are pleasant. You matter. Taking time for the things that you love is important. So I'm going to talk about diet, hydration, and gut health. So it is really important to realize that 90% of the serotonin that we have in our bodies is in our gut. And that is huge knowledge. Serotonin is the hormone that helps us feel at peace in our bodies. It helps us face the challenges of the day. It helps us have resiliency. It also supports good sleep, right? So to have 90% of it in our bellies is really amazing. And so it's important for us to understand more and more about gut health and what we need to eat and what we need to do to take care of our belly brain. And the gut is being called a belly brain. One of the books that I have on the reading list has some more information about belly brain. So, but just knowing that what you eat, how you meditate, all of that gives you that inner resiliency. Remember, this is all the ways we're filling our window of tolerance. We're making it bigger and bigger and bigger with each of these practices. So I'm going to talk about our superpower, our self-care superpower, which is water. 75% of your brain is water. 83% of your blood is water. 79% of your heart is water. Your bones are water. Your muscles, your liver, your kidneys. Your kidneys are 83% water. Sometimes you can feel your kidneys ache when you're thirsty. And so I just want to remind you that water is your self-care superpower. Movement versus exercise. If you can move every day for at least 15 minutes, you will absolutely increase your window of tolerance. It grows with that capacity, with that movement. And movement can look like anything, right? It can be dance. I think somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, dancing, that they wanted to dance to music, going for a walk, stretching, stretching during, webinars. Like if everyone is on this webinar right now, just stood up and just stretched their body, just took a nice stretch. I'm doing it myself right now. That's movement, right? My body is so grateful for that. And one of the things that I always teach the folks that I'm working with in my healing practice is to check in with your body and just ask your body, how do you want to move right now? Sometimes you want to just move just your fingers, or sometimes you want to give yourself a hug, or sometimes you want to do a really nice stretch. Other times you might feel like doing a dance or running in place. But just giving yourself permission to check in and say, how do I want to move right now, just this moment? What's my body asking of me? Do I need to roll my neck? Do I need to roll my shoulders? Do I need to wiggle my toes and know that my feet are on the ground and I'm part of the ground? I'm not just a head listening to a webinar. I'm a body and I need to touch the ground. That's what my body wanted right now. It wanted to know I've got feet and I'm on the ground. Here I am. Right? But movement, exercise is great, but movement will take you further. Right? It'll take you way further. So community and connection. Boy, is this huge right now because we're all in isolation in various degrees across the country, different places, different rules in different places. Here in Oregon, we're pretty shut down. And it's hard, right? It's hard because community is vital. It's really critical. And what the research tells us is that for 99% of human existence, we lived in small tribes. We were constantly surrounded by family and friends. Think about that. 99% of human history, we were surrounded by our beloved, right? And that is how we lived. It's amazing, amazing. And so this means that community matters, right? But I want to really take a second to talk about the difference between people being around us and community. And that difference is connection and engagement. Connection and engagement. Are the people we're around people we are connected to and feel connected to? And are they people who are engaged in our life? They're engaged in us in a way that allows us to be vulnerable, authentic, and real. Engagement, the key to engagement is vulnerability. I know that's hard to hear, especially as POCs and LGBTQ folks and marginalized folks, all of us. Like we have not lived in a world that accepted us and allowed us to be safely vulnerable. Let's just be real about it. And so as we build connection and community, we have to remember that it's not just people around us. It's not just busy folk. It is the people that we feel connected to and engaged with. And the key to that is, who can you be vulnerable with? Who can you be wholly, truly real with? Who sees you? Who hears you? Where do you go on your worst day and curl up and find home? Right? So I want you to write, I love to ask you to write, the name of one person, place, or thing that you are connected to. It does not have to be a human. It can be a fur baby, because I know my first community were fur babies. They were doggies. It can be a place, a favorite tree. It can be, a favorite friend. It can be someone you reach out to and call. But you know when you call them and you finally get them, you can just be in that person. Oh, Lisa, the Bible, a book, the Bible, right? This is where you can be myself. I can be there. Oh, Patty, my sister, she has a sister that is that, right? So write that person down and make sure that at the end of this call, you take a minute to just be with that, if you can. Just to be, even if it's just calling that person up, if they were a person who's passed, because my mama was that. Sometimes I just call up her image. I know she's in my body, and I call her up into my body, and I sit with the feeling of her, and it gives me comfort. Right? So at the end of this call, make sure you take time to make that connection. You've learned a lot. We've talked about a lot. That community, that connection is going to be important. And Bonnie's one of my teachers, she says, we humans are always seeking the warmest attachments that we can imagine. You need attachment. You need it. It's a huge part of your self-care. So this concern versus control is really something that is coming up a lot. This has been shared by my staff a lot. We've talked a bit about it. And this is really knowing the difference between what we want to be concerned about. It's not where we spend our energy. We don't want to spend our energy invested in all these things that scare us, the news, our political, who thinks what politically, natural disasters, the weather, the economy, wars, weapons, terrorists, COVID. These are the things that we get concerned about that we don't have any impact on. And we don't want to spend most of our time doing that. We want to be on the other side where we're spending most of our time really where we do have an impact, right? I don't like the word control, so I could have switched it to impact. But I have an impact on where I live. I have an impact on where I work, what I read, what I buy, all of those things, what kind of leader I want to be. So we want to shift our focus from, things that we don't have a lot of impact on to the things that we do. And when we make this shift, and the reason I included it in the webinar, is when we make this shift, we're better equipped to take care of ourselves. We have more available energy to take care of ourselves. So it allows us to do our practice better because we're not wasting energy and leaking our energy and things that we have no control over. So that it's a little bit of that kind of a practice. Organizational strategies. These are included in the PowerPoint. I'm not going to go over them because time is getting short. But what I will say about organizations is that every single organization has a responsibility to the staff to make time for self-care. However you do that, if you are a leader on this call, make that a priority. Make how your staff can nourish, care for, and support themselves and their families and their communities a priority. And that's going to look really different in different places. I'm going to skip that. I want to talk about practice, not perfection. And I think that we get this, like we've been talking for a while here, but what you want to notice is when you're slipping into perfection and slipping out of practice, right? That's what I want you to notice. So I want you to just take a second and write down, how do you know when you're slipping into perfection thinking? Of course, now Clayton Christensen's quote just helps me so much in this, because they say that the best strategy is a balance between having a deliberate plan and a flexible strategy, right? So I know that I'm slipping out of practice when I can't change what I'm doing to meet the demands of what I'm dealing with in real time. That's how I know that I'm slipping out of it, right? So I just want you to jot that down on your paper. These are just these resources for you, your thoughts, how you listened, what you learned. Make a note for yourself and also share in the chat. How do you know when you're slipping? Because perfection is the enemy of self-care, right? It will take us off course every time. But practice will take us deeper and deeper and deeper to a more nourishing, satisfying experience with ourselves and with our community. Robin says, when I become stuck or in something versus making progress. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've created our plan. Each of you hopefully has a plan. You've got your paper there and got lots of good information just about you. If you haven't had a chance to make the plan, as we've kind of walked through this process, the important thing is, as you notice with each of the questions I had, I was really specific. I was time specific. I was topic specific. So as you go, sit with yourself to create your self-care plan, be specific, review the information, listen to the webinar again, and create something that really has meaning for you. Consider your strengths and challenges, right? Consider where you are right now. Not where you hope to be, not where you wish you were, but where you are, and consider the strengths that you have and the resiliencies you have, and also the personal challenges that you're dealing with. Consider your capacity and what you can do, and consider your resources and your community, and then be ready to revise as needed, right? And be gentle and curious and consistent, right? Gentle, curious, and consistent. These tools will take you far. Simplicity is your friend, right? Be gentle with yourself. Be tender. Be loving, right? Be curious. Be open. Like, what do I do? What is going to be fun for me? How do I take care of myself? What a great question. And keep at this. It's a practice, Keep at it. These are some of the resources. I'm going to read a poem just kind of really quickly to close before we open for questions. And this is written by a self-care warrior herself. Her name is Katya Bunzon. It's in your resources. And we do a poetry share, and I told Katya I'd read hers today. It's called Patience. Patience takes another breath. Patience knows where her feet are. Patience sorts white buttons and practices calligraphy with a brush. Patience soaks the grain overnight for breakfast. Patience gives her hair the full 100 strokes. Patience explains from the beginning again. Patience doesn't hurry anyone, even with a sigh. Patience waits like a cat at a mouse hole. Patience waits for asparagus to sprout. When Patience comes home at night, she takes a slow bath with candles and sets her heart at the back door, illuminating the garden all night long. And I just love that poem because it tells me, it really nourishes me because I love poetry, but it also tells me how I want to practice my self-care. This is how I want to practice self-care. I want to be patient. I want to be able to, come home at night and take a slow bath with candles. So I invite you to write your own poems today about how you want to do your self-care. I invite you to feel the appreciation that I have for you, to feel the joy of the community that we have gathered today, and to know how important and meaningful all of your work is, and how necessary you are right now to the world. And I appreciate deeply you being on this webinar. So if there are other questions, let us know. Let me know. I'm happy to answer them in our last 10 or so minutes. Oh, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. While we wait for the questions, I want to remind everybody that this webinar recording is going to be available in Bonnet, and Brecken has put the link there. And of course, you're going to be receiving an invitation to fill out a survey after the end of the webinar. Please do. And if you want to learn more about this topic or just connect with us, you are going to be able to add your contact information at the end of the survey. Oh, the question about the certificate of attendance. You can email me, iortiz@nrcdv.org, and I'll make sure to send you the certificate. Also, you can access part 1 of the webinar series, and there you see that Brecken added the link to the recording.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you. And before we close, or while still writing, I wanted to share with our participants that at the NRCV, like I mentioned at the beginning, we're continuously listening to you and trying to come up with resources that are useful for our advocates. And we have our Care for Advocates hashtag, and there's a number of great resources that we package together. So you can find it on social media, and you can find it at bonnet.org, and just put Care for Advocates. And there's a lot of beautiful resources that we put together for you. And we also included the recording of part 1 of this webinar.
Great. I look at the questions. I don't see any. I am really loving all the appreciation, though. That's awesome.
I know.
Thank you all for that. That's amazing.
And let me tell you, Vanessa, this is needed. We've been, some of us that are lucky enough to be working from home. It's been a little while since we've been working from home. So we imagine how difficult it must be for those advocates that are providing support to survivors using the same medium, via an email, calling them. And our heart goes out for those of you that have lost your employment too. These are very stressful times, and I'm so thankful that you gave us an hour and a half just to listen, sit, and center ourselves. Hopefully, we continue to practice this, and me included. This week we were all talking that it's been a hard one. It's been a hard one. So we were so excited to be able to spend some time with you. You, at least to me, you brought me peace, and I was able just to sit and be. And that's so important right now.
Yeah, it's very important. And just knowing, I think the most important thing to know for folks is that these practices make a huge difference in how we can face uncertainty and how we can face challenge and difficulty. These are the things that build our resiliency, and they seem simple until we practice them. Yeah. They're amazing. Yeah.
Well, Vanessa, I don't think we have any questions. So I just want to thank you. First time we did this was amazing. The second time was just even better. You are amazing.
I hope so.
And you're just a gift. You're a gift to all of us.
Well, you guys are an amazing gift, and I love my advocate community. You all mean a lot to me. So I appreciate being able to serve in this way, and anytime.
Let me know if you need anything else. Of course. And I'm going to quote you. You said that the best resource you have is your people and your community. And this is our community, the community of advocates and service providers. If you want to continue the conversation, there's our information. You can follow us on Twitter, at NRCDV, Facebook. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. So just connect with us. We are here and we're going through it. And, we need you and you need us. That's basically it. We are a community. We're a community. We are a community. We are never alone. We've got each other. And the National Resource Center is such a resource. I appreciate you so much. So thank you, Yvonne, and all of your peers there at the National Resource Center for all of your amazing work. And I'm just thinking back to how you opened and all of those amazing values that you shared and what it meant to me to hear them. So good work from, thank you to all of you at the National Resource Center. And I want to thank you also, all of the NRCDV staff that's behind the scenes, from Brecken doing the chat. We have our captioner. We have, so we have a great group that has been making sure that you guys receive the information today. So thank you to all of our staff. Thank you to you, Vanessa, and thank you to all of our participants. We appreciate you. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again later. Take care, everybody. Bye, everybody. Take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye. Bye.